Welcome to Foundations and Grails. I'm Mike Kelly. In this video, we're going to finish setting up our Windows development environment by installing the Groovy Grails tool suite. For best results, you'll want to put this video into full screen mode by clicking here. Also, if you have the available bandwidth, be sure to put it in HD mode so the computer screens are nice and clear. The Groovy Grails tool suite is an IDE, or Integrated Development Environment, and it has several advantages over programming with the command line and a basic text editor. First of all, you get syntax highlighting. This will recognize the different types of commands in your code and put them in different colors, making it easier to see the structure of what you're writing. Also, an IDE gives you what's called code completion. As you begin typing commands in your code, it will recognize those commands and pop up a window suggesting what you might be typing. Then you just press enter and it will complete the typing for you. This allows you to write your code faster and also avoid typing mistakes. The Groovy Grails tool suite is built on a platform called Eclipse, which was originally designed for Java developers. However, Eclipse is open source, which allows other developers to build plugins for other languages as well. And you'll find Eclipse plugins for languages like PHP, Python, and of course Groovy and Grails. With it being open source, it allows these plugin developers to bundle their plugins with Eclipse itself, so you only have one install file to get both Eclipse and the plugin that you want. Finally, Eclipse and its plugins look and behave the same way on all platforms. So if you're going to continue on in the Foundations and Grails course, you'll be able to use the platform of your choice, and everything will look and behave the same whether you're using Windows, OS X, or Linux. So without further ado, let's switch over to our Windows machine and install the Groovy Grails tool suite. In our last video, we installed the Java Developers Kit and the Grails libraries. You need to install the Java Developers Kit before you can install the Groovy Grails tool suite. We'll get the Groovy Grails tool suite right off of the grails.org website. Just go to the Products and Services menu and choose Groovy Grails tool suite. As you scroll down, there's a link here for download GGTS. And then you can fill out your contact information. I've done this many times, so I'll just go ahead and go to the download page. SpringSource has two versions of their tool. The first is the Spring Tool Suite, which again runs on Eclipse, but is designed more for the Spring programming environment. The tool that we want is the Groovy Grails tool suite. As I mentioned earlier, it runs on Eclipse, and currently there are two different versions of Eclipse out there, 3.8.2 as well as 4.2.2. So you can see that you can get versions of the Groovy Grails tool suite for whichever version of Eclipse that you want to run on. Now the 4.2.2 version of Eclipse has a slightly updated user interface and some new features. However, it's still being performance tuned, and the Groovy Grails tool suite doesn't run quite as quickly as it does on the earlier release of Eclipse. So I'm going to choose to download the tool suite based on Juno 3.8.2. So you'll need to choose whether you're going to be on Windows 32-bit or 64-bit. I happen to be on a 32-bit machine, and I want to grab the installer version as opposed to just the zip file. Now the nice thing about Eclipse and its plugins is that it installs very cleanly. All of its executable files install into a single directory structure. There are no registry entries. In fact, there's not even a trace of it in the installed programs control panel. So if you ever need to remove Eclipse, all you have to do is delete the directory in which it's installed and remove any icons that you created. So I'll click on the installer file and let it download. It's a pretty large file, 461 megs. So if you're following along in the video, you may want to click pause at this point, because I'm just going to go ahead and assume that I've already downloaded the entire file. Now that you have your file, I'm just going to drag it on my desktop like I did with the other installation files. And we're ready to go ahead and start the installation. So I'll double click on it. And there'll be a few questions I have to answer, but for the most part we'll just take all the defaults. So we'll click Next on the Welcome page, accept the license agreement, And the first question we need to answer is where we want to install it. Now this is the default path, which happens to be where the install file is located. But if you watch the last video where we installed Grails, we created a working directory right off the root of our C drive called Grails. That's where I want to put this. So I'll put it in C:\Grails, and I'll create a subdirectory called ggts for it. Okay, we'll click OK to create that directory. And now we get to choose what we want to install. Now, of course, it's going to install the tool suite itself. It's got this server setup, which you may or may not use. We're not going to use it for the Foundations in Grails course, but I'm not sure what else you may be using this for, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it checked. You'll also notice that it offers to install Grails. Now, in the last video, I already configured my own environment for Grails, so I don't really need it to install it again. Now, if you're going to work exclusively in the tool suite, you could go ahead and just let it install Grails for you and not do it manually like I did. I happen to like the flexibility of controlling the location and the versioning of Grails. So I'm just going to uncheck this and use the existing version of Grails that I already have installed. Now, as I've already mentioned, the tool suite requires that you have a Java Developers Kit installed, and here it is asking for that path. So I'm going to browse for it, and I installed it in the default directory, which is on my C drive underneath Program Files inside of Java, and there it is there. So I'll just select that and click Save. Now it's going to verify that this is a valid installation, so when I click Next, if it isn't valid, I would get an error message here. Otherwise, it'll continue on with the installation as it's doing here. And we're all done. So we'll click Next. And from here on out, we'll just choose the defaults. So I'll click Next. And I'd like to go ahead and launch this, so I'll check that and choose Finish. You'll get a registration and an information page in the background here on your browser, and then it'll start up the Groovy Grails tool suite. Now when the tool suite launches, it's going to ask you to create a workspace, and that's just a directory where it's going to save all of its project files. I'd like mine to create all the project files in the same place where Grails is, which is just off the C drive in Grails. If you watched the last video, that's the working directory that we created. I don't want it to ask me this every time that it opens, so I will just check to use that as the default and then click OK. And this is what our environment looks like. It'll ask if you want to send some usage information off to Spring. You can accept or reject that. And this is what's called the welcome screen to the Groovy and Grails tool suite. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this window. And all the work that we're going to do is on the dashboard. So I'll go ahead and open that. And this is what it looks like. You have a lot of helpful windows here. I'm working on a smaller screen than you probably are, so I'm going to close some of these down. But the nice thing about Eclipse is that you have the ability to move these around, open them, close them, resize them, do whatever you want with them. So I'm going to create a fairly minimalist work environment. Now, just like I did with the previous video, I'd like to create a sample application and make sure that everything is running correctly. So to create a new Grails application, we go to the File menu, we say New, and we say Grails Project. We'll type in our name. I used Demo for the first one, so I'm going to call this one Test. And then it needs to know where Grails is located. Now you'll remember that when I installed the Groovy Grails tool suite, I unchecked for it to install Grails. If I had left that checked, it would know where Grails is installed. So as a result of that, I need to configure a Grails installation. And I do that by clicking this link here. I'll start off by adding a new one, giving it a name. I'll call it Grails-2.2.1, and then I'll browse to the location where it's installed, which is on my computer under C, underneath Grails, and there are the actual libraries themselves. Okay, so now I have an installation configured, and it will use that as the default for all new Grails projects. It'll tell me where it's going to put the project file, which is in that workspace under the subdirectory called Test. So I'll just choose Finish. And now it's going to create the application. Now it's not doing anything magical here. It's just using the same command that we used from the command line, create-app and the name of the application. So you just watch down here for its progress, and when this disappears, you know that everything's complete. So now I want to run the application and access it through the browser. The way that you run your application is you right-click on it, and you come down to Run As, and there are many different ways that you can run your application, and each way will configure your environment slightly differently. I want to run it the same way I did from the command line, which is using the Run App command, so I'll choose that there. And just like it did from the command line, it's going to use the Run App command. Just like with the command line, the first time that you run an application in the tool suite, the Windows firewall will ask your permission to allow access to it. And then once all the servers are fired up, you'll have that message saying that the server's running. It'll give you the location where the application is running, and the nice thing is it's hyperlinked, so all you have to do is click on it. Now Eclipse comes with its own web browser, so our application is going to open up right inside of Eclipse. And there we have our familiar welcome page. Again, we can just double check here. We've got Grails 2.2.1 running under our Java virtual machine, which is version 1.7.0, update 17. So just like we were in the command line environment, we have a working Grails application. Now if you're following along in the Foundations in Grails course, the next several videos are going to cover installation on the other platforms, which will be OS X as well as Linux. So if you're not using those platforms, obviously you can skip those videos. Then after that, we'll get to the heart of the course, which is beginning to build our Project Tracker application. So I hope to see you in the next videos.